This is a continuation or sequel of my last video where I painstakingly tried to figure out what was the best overall reverb pedal and what was the best reverb pedal for those on a budget. And hopefully, since that video came out, the Supreme Court didn't outlaw pedals or something, because I filmed all of this talking head shit in the same day. Where I am right now, it's not even Thanksgiving yet. I'm just an old soul. Anyway, in all of this testing, I found a lot of gems, and if I had the time, I could literally make a year of content just from the modern offerings of reverb pedals. But within that deep pile of gems, I found some real precious gems. I would consider both of these things so unique that they tend to stop being effects processors and start being the primary instrument in the music you're making with them. This video is about two of those things which I am particularly excited about. I'm jacked.
I'm jacked to the tits!
A few months ago, an employee from Strymon hit me up and said, "Hey, have you ever tried Starlab?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, you know, we've watched your videos on Reverb and we want to know what you think. Would it be cool if we sent you one?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that'd be great." And so they sent one over. And I'm not gonna lie, it's already become one of those modules where I'm annoyed with myself because I'm using it in every single patch that I make. It makes my decent and otherwise forgettable modular ideas sound like the score to a Steven Soderbergh movie. That's a good thing. But really, within a few hours of installing the Starlab, I liked it so much that I went online and purchased the Strymon Nightsky pedal, which is a very similar effects unit built around the same algorithm and premise. And that also is amazing, but it's almost as if I want to say that it's not really a reverb pedal. I mean, it is a reverb pedal, but I almost want to call it a shimmer pedal, and boy does it shim. When you think of the type of pedal where you play like one guitar harmonic and it takes you here, it is the king of that sound and functionality in my opinion. So let's take a deep dive into that algorithm. For this video, we're going to be using a Dreadbox Nymphs, and a Dreadbox Nymphs is an analog portable polysynth that is pretty basic when it comes to just raw tone. And it's a really great example to be pumping through this, and then I'll also play the guitar through these pedals. All right, so let's just start with a nice tick. So we have a mod section here where you can choose between a variety of LFOs or an envelope to control the reverb level, the pitch, or the filter. Over here we have the decay section where you can kind of adjust the algorithm itself. Then we have a tone section with two different types of filters. And then over here we have our voice section, which is probably the most control I've ever seen over a shimmer before. And then we have our wet and dry levels. And then down here we do have a sequencer, which is a really interesting addition. We'll get into that in a moment. Everything's kind of turned down right now. We have a sparse texture and the quantization is on smooth. The quantization will put it in scale. We'll go into that soon too.
Now let's test those dip-dang-ol algorithms and see how they hold up.
We could increase the length. Let's turn that pitch to 12 o'clock. I really like that. All right, let's turn them back down and listen to the dense algorithm. Turn the size down. That's great. It gets kind of tonal a little bit. And then finally, diffuse mode, which should sound a lot more platey or smooth. Whoa. quantize has 3 different modes: smooth, half step, and scale, which binds it to a scale. But smooth is just kind of like what you would expect from an analog delay pedal. Whoa. Hit infinite, and I'll just hold this. Shimmer is usually if a reverb has shimmer, I just do a section on the shimmer, but shimmer is so integral to how this entire pedal works that let's not ignore that elephant in the room and let's just add it to what we're playing with here. And so if the shimmer is on input, it should sound like this. Just 1 octave up. And when the shimmer's on regen, that's when it will sound like the normal shimmer that you're probably used to hearing. So let's just put it on input only and have it harmonize. Nice. Now glimmer, on the other hand, is pretty interesting. So we have shimmer, and then glimmer does this. Kind of more of a filtered way of doing it, I suppose. Ooh, that's almost like a phaser. Like, I feel like if you were to actually have this in an overall song, it wouldn't just vacuum up the entire mix. It would allow you to keep the drums and bass in and things like that. So while smooth just sort of does this, if we turn quantize to half step, it'll do this instead. So it just stays in tune with whatever the original note was. And then finally we have scale. So if you want to change that scale, you just hold down scale and we have these different options. This is Dorian. All right, I'm gonna hold this and we're gonna get we have one last thing to test, and that is the reverse shimmer or the shimmer down. And there was something about the Specular Tempus that just blew my mind when I made a video about that pedal a long time ago. It was the first time that any reverb, whether it be a pedal or a rack unit or a VST plugin or natural reverb, the first time that any reverb algorithm sounded good when pitching down, or at least when really playing with that effect. And the Specular Tempus just knocked that out of the park and blew me away. We're gonna have to try it. I'm obviously not in front of my computer right now, but if I remember correctly, I had a Nord rack unit playing a nice little sequence of high poly notes. And the nymphs and the key step are more than capable of pulling that off, so let's try it. There is a lot going on with the Nightsky, and we're not going to get to the bottom of it all here, but for example, there is that entire sequencer function that you saw earlier. The sequencer function is very cool, very programmable, very fun. I played around with it quite a bit, and I had fun with it, but I didn't make anything that sounded good enough to where I wanted to record it. There is a pre and post drive, and when most of us think of a reverb pedal, we don't think about overdrive or anything like that. We think of it as something that we don't want. When you have that low, mid, feel like your eardrums are tearing effect going on with reverbs, and all reverbs have this when you put the wrong note through the wrong algorithm. I can't just come up with an example and test it. It's one of those things that happens when you don't want it to happen. Usually my workaround for that is a compressor and an EQ pedal. This sometimes can do the trick. If you dig through the menu, you'll find a whole lot of hidden functionality. For example, if I hold this filter button down here and turn the reverb knob, that will be my resonance. Another thing we could do, for example, is set up a patch like that, and then hold down 2 and 7, in which we could just move that up like this and maybe move the size up like that and the shimmer up like that. Hit another preset button. Now when we hit morph, and then we could adjust the morph speed by holding this down and just turning the reverb knob, so really short. I purchased the Nightsky for about $429, which is pretty solidly in the middle of the boutique pedal price range. The Starlab is a much pricier $649. And as mentioned, the Starlab is a much beefier and more controllable version of the same core algorithm, but if you're not in a modular, you obviously don't want to be cramming that into your pedal board and stepping on it. I do think that if Starlab came out in like 2018 and was priced a little bit less, it would be up there with Maths and Clouds in terms of modules that every single modular owner tends to have, and we would probably all be sick of its sound by now, but fortunately for me, we're not. So with Strymon being a pedal company bridging into modular, Soma Labs is a modular experimental instrument company bridging into pedals. And with Cosmos, holy shit. Let's briefly rewind to 1966. A 30-year-old Steve Reich took a recording of somebody saying the phrase, "come out to them," and looped it with several different tape machines slowly drifting in and out of sync. This created an incredibly unique rhythmic and harmonic experience that would eventually come to be known as phase music. And Steve would go on to use this technique with live music composition and also become one of the most important composers of the 20th century. If you happen to catch this video that I made earlier this year, then you can probably guess that phase music is a bit of an obsession of mine. What didn't dawn on me 2 years ago when the Cosmos was first announced was that it's a looper built on this very premise. And if you stack enough alternatively phased loops together, it makes reverb, but in an entirely different way than any plugin or pedal has before. Need I say more? Let's dive into it. So this is the Sound Machine Laboratories Cosmos Drifting Memory Station. I had to install a teleprompter to remember that whole name. I feel like most people who played with the Cosmos themselves would describe it as an instrument in itself, but if I had to lump it into some sort of category, I actually would call it a reverb pedal, maybe a looper pedal. So I just have a basic little tick here, and I'm gonna hit record and just press it so you could hear what's going on. And so these dots here are how much it's allowing it to sample when you hit record. The smallest dot is like 1 point something seconds. The middle dot is about 7 seconds, and the big dot is like 20 seconds. And I believe that that's slightly different for these other ones. So if I turn this over here, we will have 4. And if I turn it over here, we will have many. Now, after we let this go on for about 45 seconds, you can probably understand why I consider it a reverb.
In the delay algorithms, Blur adds some sort of cross-feedback between delay lines, which I reckon means that it's feeding the shit back into itself. In Reverb, Blur does absolutely nothing. I suppose that's its lunch break or something. In the granular algorithm, Blur modulates the position of the grains. Now over here, drift. In delay, they say drift modulates the panorama of delays with an asynchronous LFO that's modulated by a slow, chaotic signal. I think that means it pans stuff. In Reverb, it goes out to lunch with Blur. In granular mode, it does a similar thing as Blur, but that slow, chaotic LFO character is involved.
Drive is pretty much self-explanatory, as it just adds more amplitude to the signal, and if you want to create distortion, that's how you do it. In this use case, suppressor is going to be almost like a gentle limiter, and compressor is going to be a little bit more aggressive. And then we have feedback, and then we have mix. If you have blur all the way down, the high pass and low pass filters will have some level of permanency in the flow of what you're doing, but if you turn blur up, it will increase the permanency due to blur going back into this. I hate saying these things because I feel like just playing with it is so much more useful. Finally, this last mode is kind of a granulizer. Oh no, it froze up. Just kidding. If we turn blur up, should make things a little more dynamic. Let's update the firmware. Allegedly, that firmware update will change the drive knob to control the pitch. I guess what I want to know is, can I just play the C key here and record it? Hit more C key. And hit more C key. And hit more C key. And eat more Z key. Well, that's good to know, I guess.
Now the boys down at the ranch told me about another firmware that makes everything fall into rhythm and even operates as some kind of polyrhythmic looper pedal. That's a whole lot, ain't it? Well, hell, it will be a whole ordeal on Ben's streaming channel, as this video has been long enough and the sun is going down.
The Cosmos costs around $600. I've seen it for some reason sell as high as $1,000 on Reverb.com, but typically it retails around $600. That price is worth it for me, but I'm also deeply obsessed with phase music. I'm literally pissed off that I slept on it for so long. Now, briefly speaking of Cosmos-related pedals, a lot of people have asked me about the Microcosm, which is a hugely popular pedal, and for good reason. It's extremely fun and turns about just anything into a vast ambient texture. In all transparency, I reached out to Hologram in 2020 and told them I'd like to do a full feature on Microcosm, as it seemed like it was a much welcome improvement from Infinite Jets, which I found a lot of issues with, and I wanted to make up for a much earlier critical review. The company kindly asked that I not make a Microcosm video as long as the Infinite Jets video is not removed from this channel, as it may cause the company damage. Fair enough. Since then, I actually have played around with the Microcosm quite a bit, and I think it's a really fun pedal. I don't think that it has great reverb, but that's fine because it's not a reverb pedal. I would say that between the Cosmos and Microcosm, the Cosmos feels more controlled and predictable, if that makes any sense. Also, the Cosmos also has the alternate rhythm firmware, which I didn't even touch on in this video, but that kind of adds to more control. And the Microcosm, on the other hand, feels more like a happy accident maker. Both are similar pedals that are both awesome in their own right, and I hope that, like me, my viewers feel somewhat fortunate to have two different pedals of that innovation and caliber to choose from. And Hologram, if you're watching this, congratulations on your recent success. I hope that the future is equally, if not more, successful. I'm sorry to bring up this bit of bitterness in a video, but I feel like that is actually better than pretending that the Microcosm doesn't exist like I've been doing for 3 years, because it does exist and it's awesome, and I feel like I needed to mention that. What I just described is unfortunately another good example of why you can't make videos like this without strings attached, whether those strings make you want to talk about a product more or make you not want to mention a popular product for 3 years. There is no manual for this audio YouTubing thing. You learn everything by experience the hard way. And one thing that I learned by experience is that no YouTuber is unbiased. And that's for a really good reason. It's because no human being is unbiased. As I mentioned previously, I am winding down gear reviews for a while after this, as they generally cause more problems than they're worth. One idea that I've been flirting with that kind of presents an alternative way of making gear-related content is to do it without speaking. And that also allows me to get a little bit more creative with photography. But I have a feeling that the YouTube algorithm will not agree with my vision there, and I feel like gear marketing departments will not exactly be thrilled with that proposal, but fuck it, we might as well try it. If that interests you and you want to see more of this type of thing, and if you want to be part of a super healthy community of musicians and creators, do monthly songwriting challenges, and have access to loads of samples, music, and field recordings, and so on, my Patreon is as little as $1 or $2. I'm still working out the math on that. Keep creating. Bye.